the financial crisis, a major aspect of British life has changed in a profound way. Fewer people can afford to buy their own homes, and those that do buy them later. Combined with the decline in social housing, more people than ever are in the private rental sector, including low-income families with children and the most vulnerable. This sector is poorly regulated, offers little security, and has seen rents rise exponentially. In London, they're up by almost 40% in a decade. In Bristol, there's been a more than 40% increase since 2011, while in Edinburgh, they will rise by 16% in the next 5 years. The capital's mayor, Sadiq Kahn, has proposed a new system of rent controls, already common in much of Europe and North America, that would put a check on these out-of-control prices. The case in favour is overwhelming, and our MPs, 1 in 5 of whom are landlords, need to put aside their own interests and support change in the interests of the millions who need it. We are becoming a nation of renters, and it's about time we adjusted.
Right.
Are you a landlord, Phil?
No, I'm not, but that's probably about the only sensible thing that's ever come out of Khan's head, to be honest. I've got to be... All right, OK, that's the only thing I'm certainly going to go slightly along the lines of agreeing with anyway. Look, my family all live in London, and none of them can afford to live where they want to live, OK? And nobody gets a step onto the ladder or anything anymore, and it's extremely difficult to live here. And you look at areas like, you know, around where I am even, you know, Shoreditch and London Fields and what, they've been gentrified, and it's snobbery, and it's all sort of put the price... They've almost forced the normal man out, do you know what I mean? They want to keep the pie and mash shop I'll add, but they've forced the normal man out of town, haven't they? Right? So there are things I'd like to see happen. You know, it's in controlling rent and that sort of stuff, I'd like to see it capped. But I'd also like to see people, you know, measures in place like perhaps paying the landlord direct out of your cheque and not giving people a chance to get themselves into arrears and all that sort of stuff as well, because that's another part of this problem. Once you get into arrears, you're in and proper, aren't you? Because there's no making it up because you lost it in the first place. So with people who are struggling on low incomes, their money shouldn't be going into their bank, which it does now because it's easy administration. That money should be going straight to the landlord direct and that sort of stuff. So there are stuff we could do to slightly help. But as to the problem of rent being sky high, it's a hideous problem.
And it is, and just before I bring everyone else in, it is about more than people's bank balances. This is about communities, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
I just want to read you a quote from Hannah Slater. She's the policy manager at Generation Rent. And she says, unaffordable rent increases force people into stressful moves away from neighbourhoods where they have roots, thereby eroding communities. Renters need stability in our homes that can only come from certainty over what rent we pay, but we need to be able to afford a home in the first place. So I think that goes to the heart of what you're saying. Our communities are changing. Our cities are becoming only places for the rich and high-earning professionals. And we need cities that are mixed, that have communities who've been there, who have roots as well. And it's just...
It is an interesting one. So one of my cousins does places up and that, right?
Okay.
Now, he said to me years ago, it used to be a case that the kitchen was the focal point of the house. Now, because everybody can afford to eat out in these affluent areas, the kitchen's the smallest room in the house that they're doing up. And that's just a small sign of how things are going.
Yeah. Well, Afua, much as you were the cause for increase in right-wing tension in the previous part of the show, you have just displayed your total economic illiteracy. All that will happen is that landlords won't let rooms. And there is research that proves that. Instead, they will just use them almost as where you can use as containers or Airbnb or whatever it might be, or kids coming back from college or university for the summer. If you look at some examples, on the face of it, although I never like the idea of government controlling anything that's in the private market, I believe in turning down government control and letting people sort themselves out. On the face of it, it's one of those things that, oh, yes, that can work. In practice, it probably doesn't. I said what action... If I had loads of rooms in London, I just won't let them. I'm not going to let the government control. I'll just put storage in it or put kids in it. Afua, I'm not familiar with Stockholm. I am familiar with New York, and I have to underscore everything he said.
As well.
OK, it is an issue... Just finish. It is an issue of supply and demand. We haven't got enough supply. This won't turn the supply around.
I am familiar with Stockholm. Do you know why? Because it's the one example that right-wing commentators always use to say this doesn't work. I'm not saying that that these systems often don't have loopholes that landlords and developers get around, and that is a problem. But if you look at a lot of German cities, you look at Munich, you look at Berlin, you look at a lot of other cities in North America, this system is working. It's not perfect. But when I listen to people like that, who says this is going to be bad for the poor and immigrants, what are they doing about the reality that those people... I've done reporting here about the fact that 1/5 of private rental accommodation properties in this country are not fit for human habitation. And those are the exact groups that live there. Nobody's worried about them. Nobody's proposing anything.
But all I would say is I totally understand where you're coming from, and in theory, I agree with the sentiment, but in practice, it just does not work. As somebody who has owned properties and I stupidly sold them, I wouldn't be here if I kept them. If I kept them all, I wouldn't be sitting here today, let me tell you. I think when it comes to the rent market, we understand the issues, but actually, Sadiq Kahn, who Trevor and we know very well, I think what he hasn't done is he hasn't made good on his promise to build more homes. And actually, that should have been his #1 priority.
But why do you think
Not
that
the
is?
policing.
Because if you look at the investment by developers, Brexit has been devastating for investment on construction in the last 2 years. And that's a fact.
But as a mayor, he could have brought together multi-stakeholders and actually created his own fund to build houses under his watch. He could have. He didn't need to go to developers. If he was serious about that, he could have done it himself.
I'm kind of with June on this. I think this is a free hit for the mayor.
And he could do it
honestly,
in
I think
London.
he should be better than that. I'm sort of with you. The statistic about the rise in private rents, particularly in London, tells us that rents increased by 38% between 2005 and 2016. The question I would have for you, Afua, is why this solution, which clearly hasn't quite cut it. You talked about the way communities have changed. The biggest change in most communities, particularly London communities, look at the high street, dying, commercial property empty. Why wouldn't our first priority be to make the planning process work in such a way that we can turn those high street properties into residential properties very quickly? Because I think that would be the fastest way of making more properties available and keeping rents down, rather than getting into this rather complicated
and then make better use of Greater
operation.
When I propose this, I can say it because I think it's quite a radical measure that we've never done in England before, but I don't think it's the only solution.
We had rent controls in the 50s and 60s.
But it was a different model, though.
Did it work?
It was a different model.
No,
and it was related to tenancy agreements that had a lot of protection. But I think we also need house building. I think we need to build more social housing. We need to build more housing because one of the reasons the prices have risen is because of the shortage. I don't in any way deny that, but I think this is one piece of the puzzle that we should look at. And I agree with you about reforming planning laws, but I don't think that always turning high streets into more accommodation is always the answer, because you get these kind of sleeper communities where there's no commercial activity, where there are no communal spaces, where people just live so that they can commute somewhere else to work, and you get very dead areas, and we're already seeing that in a lot of towns where the high street is falling apart. So it's not a simple solution.
We need people moving out of London anyway. We need to start developing other parts of the country. So actually, maybe what will happen in the future is this won't be the focus of everything. And that's actually what the Americans have been very good at creating hubs where you have different sectors in different parts of the country, so it's spread out better.
If you look at Manchester or Bristol, when a place becomes a new hub, the rents rise exponentially there too, and that's why I think we need rent control.
I can just see Greg Byrne up loads of old House of Fraser stores. You'll be out there now, every House of Fraser.
Nothing new.
Yeah, you're on your own on that one.